So in the most recent video that was posted, it was how to fish fast in the wintertime. And you know, I like fishing fast in the wintertime because dragging something really slow across the bottom, fishing with little bitty baits, it gets old sometimes. But you know, sometimes fishing fast, you'll pick up a few bites here and there, and sometimes they're really good fish. But a lot of times in the wintertime, fishing slow with little baits or fishing slow with big baits is the best way to pick up good bites. So today I'm going to go over several baits I'm comfortable with throwing and love throwing for fishing super slow and methodical in the wintertime. So, as you may have guessed, the first bait I'm going to talk about is a Huddleston. This is a Huddleston 68. It's 6 inches long. It's got a big thumping tail, which is better than a paddle tail, supposedly, at fishing in cold water because it moves in super cold water and moves at super slow speeds. So, to fish this, as I talked about in the last video, you can throw this along the bank, fish it pretty fast in the wintertime and draw bites if the fish are moved up and warming themselves in the sun along the cover and such. But a lot of times in the wintertime, these fish are out in deeper water, like which we have here. It's 2 or 3 feet and then gets probably 6 to 8 feet right here in the middle, and there's a little creek bed running right up the center of this. So with this Huddleston, you're gonna throw it out and just creep it along the bottom. Super slow. And this is also super boring. There's really nothing worse than just barely reeling something. You're not really giving it any action with the rod, not giving it really any action with the reel at all, besides just super slowly reeling it. Most of the time, you keep your rod tip low to the water, and the only way I'm really comfortable fishing a Huddleston this way is from the bank, because I think in the boat, the boat's moving a lot. It would be nice if you had spot lock or power poles or something, but from on a boat, the boat's going to be moving around and you're moving the bait. So sometimes you'll be reeling super slow and you're just picking up slack. You're not even moving the bait. Sometimes you're moving backwards in the boat and you're reeling that a lot faster than you need to be. So about the only time I do this is from the bank, and I have caught fish, but not near as many as normal techniques like a Ned rig, which we'll talk about later. But you just creep this super slow across the bottom and you'll feel it get to some structure, like this back in this cut. The cut of this little lake is mostly mud, but there's some trees and stuff along the bottom. Really not trying to get in those trees because I don't want to lose this bait, but that's where the fish will be, on the bottom. They'll be along that cover. They're not just going to sit anywhere. They're going to find a good spot, and usually they'll group up on it. So just creep it slow along the bottom. This little bitty paddle tail swim bait. It's got a hidden hook. This is a MegaBass Dark Sleeper. I think it's MegaBass, but it is a Dark Sleeper. It's a super heavy little swim bait. It's got a big piece of lead in there. The lead comes all the way back up to here, almost as far back as the hook does. And this little tail, super soft, has a ton of action. And I just picked this up recently, and I think it's going to be one of my new favorite swim baits for the summertime too. The way you fish this in the wintertime, similar to a Huddleston, where you just slowly drag it along the bottom. I feel like I'm stuck on some junk. But this is how I like fishing. I don't like just throwing out and reeling something super, super slow, because a lot of times you'll come across a bunch of stuff and not even feel it. Like right here, it's getting hard to reel, like I'm coming through stuff. But if you turn sideways and drag it with the rod tip down, you can actually see the rod flexing when you're coming up over stuff. And in this bottom, I'm probably just dragging through a bunch of leaves and hanging on to muck. But as soon as you find some hard spots, some gravel, you know, harder bottom, even if it is mud, just harder bottom, you can drag this along really slow. Fish it basically like a little jig, and you can fish a normal paddle tail. That feels like a fish. No. But you can fish a normal paddle tail the same way, but this was made specifically for this. Heavy, small profile. You know, I'm fishing for largemouth, but it's a killer on smallmouth. A lot of the videos you see about this bait, they're fishing for smallmouth, because I think a lot of times you throw smaller baits for smallmouth anyway. So you make, it's really genius really, you make a small swim bait that's heavy, that you can fish in deep water, shallow water. It's got a little bit of weedlessness. It's just an awesome bait that I'm gonna have to fish with a lot more, because I think it'll be a killer wintertime and summertime alike. But I like fishing this, just like I said, just like a jig. Throw it out, put a finger on the line, be able to feel just a little better. Just lift it straight up. Just pump it really slow, just like you would a jig. And doing that, instead of reeling it in super slow, like I said, you can feel everything just a little bit better, I think. Now, we're gonna stay small. Just talked about the tiny swim bait. Now we're gonna talk about a tiny, tiny jig. This is a Molix Nano Jig. I think it's like 3/16 of an ounce. It's got some awesome color. It's kind of a green pumpkin, but it's got some red flake in there. Perfect for clear water, like we're fishing right now, which is super, super clear water. Got a clear weed guard, awesome for clear water. And I even threw on a little Z-Man Ned rig bait on the back of it, just to show you how small this jig really is. But it is heavy enough. It is a jig with the trailer and the skirt. It's heavy enough to fish on a bait caster. I think it's really meant to fish on a spinning rod, but I like fishing bait casters, so that's what I'm throwing it on. This is an awesome little jig. I think, just like I talked about with the Dark Sleeper, the last swim bait we talked about, would be awesome to fish for smallmouth with. But this little jig, throw it out, feed it some line so it sinks straight down. It's not going to be heavy enough to pull line off the reel itself, so you give it a little bit of line. Then, just like the Dark Sleeper, just slowly lift it up. Give it a few pops here and there. Get it over the cover you're working through. Just fish it just like a normal jig. Except this one is bite size. And see, that's the stuff that's on the bottom out there. Now there is a creek bed that runs down through here, but you don't really find a lot of rocks until you get down in there, in that area. But there's somebody fishing over there right now, so you just throw it out just like a normal jig. Slow drag. And you know, this is perfect for when you want to fish something on a bait caster. I like throwing a bait caster a lot more than a spinning rod anyway. So that's why I'm doing this on a bait caster instead of a spinning rod. But there's a nice stick fish, tree pounder. Awesome little bait. Now, jig wise, this is perfect for super clear water, super finesse, because it's such a small presentation. Clear weed guard. This is 12-pound fluorocarbon, clear line, fairly light line for a bait caster. And I got this little Ned rig bait on the back of it, which makes it stand up just a little bit. Perfect for finesse fishing. So, keeping the trend of small baits, you got a Ned rig. Killer bait, absolutely slays fish, summertime, wintertime, all the time. This bait is outstanding for catching numbers, and occasionally you'll luck into a big one. So this is a heavier weight. I don't know exactly what size, but this is just a green pumpkin Ned rig, Z-Man TRD. And the reason so many people like this is this right here. It just stretches, it floats, so it stands straight up, just slays fish. In the wintertime, this is fished almost the exact same as the previous baits we've talked about, which is making for an exciting video, I can tell you. Everything is fished basically the same way in the winter when it's a slow presentation. You throw it out, you just slow drag it. Now, just slow drag it right on the bottom, just like a jig. It's a little smaller presentation than a jig, even that micro jig, because the skirt on those micro jigs will flare out. Skirt on any jig will flare out. So the Ned rig doesn't do that. So just a little bit less, or a little bit more finesse presentation than the micro jig, but fished the exact same way. If you think you know where some fish are, throw out, drag it a few times. What I like to do is throw out and drag it until I find some rocks or a piece of cover, like a stick. Especially in this clear water, you know, just one little stick might hold fish, a log, something like that, and just sit there. Now with the Ned rig, you can get that line tight like it is now, and just literally just shake it. And with that heavier head, that's why I like the heavier jig head. On the Ned rig, you can just let it sit there and shake it, and that little Ned rig will just be shaking in one spot. Caught a lot of fish doing that. Ned rig, awesome wintertime bait. So one of the last baits that I want to talk about is something I don't even have with me, is a drop shot. A drop shot is worked pretty much essentially the exact same as a Ned rig. Now the technique is a little different, because with a drop shot you'll have a weight on the bottom, and then the bait, if you're to feed up the line, 2 or 3 feet maybe, 1 feet sometimes, but usually I'd say 2 feet up the line, 1.5 feet, 12 to 14 inches up the line. And what that does is keep your bait up off the bottom, so you're dragging your bait will be up here, suspended up off the bottom. And usually use like a little minnow. I like Gulp and Powerbait minnows because of the smell and because they look good. So that little minnow will just be sitting there twitching, and draws a lot of strikes in the wintertime from these super cold fish.